And so as we ready ourselves for worship this morning, as Arlene lights our chalice, please hear these words from Lama Surya Das, Awakening the Buddha Within. Tips and pointers for building a spiritual life from scratch. Pray, meditate, be aware, stay awake, bow, practice yoga, feel, chant and sing, breathe and smile, relax, enjoy, laugh, play, create, envision, let go, forgive, accept, walk, exercise, move, work, serve, contribute, listen, learn, inquire, consider, reflect. Cultivate oneself, enhance competencies, cultivate contentment, cultivate flexibility, cultivate friendship and collaboration. Open up, expand, include, lighten up, dream, celebrate and appreciate, give thanks, evolve, love, share, give, receive, walk softly, live gently, expand, radiate, dissolve, simplify, surrender, trust, be born anew. And I would add one more thing: worship. Come, let us worship together.
This reading is from Thich Nhat Hanh's book, The Miracle of Mindfulness. This book has a special place in my heart. It's the first book that introduced me to meditation. More than 30 years ago, when I first entered the monastery, the monks gave me a small book called The Essential Discipline for Daily Use, written by the Buddhist monk Doktae from the Bao San Pagoda, and they told me to memorize it. It was a thin book. It couldn't have been more than 40 pages, but it contained all the thoughts Doktae used to awaken his mind while doing any task. When he woke up in the morning, his first thought was, "Just awakened, I hope that every person will attain great awareness and see in complete clarity." When he washed his hands, he used this thought to place himself in mindfulness. "Washing my hands, I hope that every person will have pure hands to receive reality." The book is comprised entirely of such sentences. Their goal was to help the beginning practitioner take hold of his own consciousness. The Sutra of Mindfulness says, when walking, the practitioner must be conscious that he is walking. When sitting, the practitioner must be conscious that she is sitting. When lying down, the practitioner must be conscious that he is lying down. No matter what position one's body is in, the practitioner must be conscious of that position. Practicing thus, the practitioner lives in direct and constant mindfulness of the body. The mindfulness of the positions of one's body is not enough, however. We must be conscious of each breath, each movement, every thought and feeling, everything which has any relation to ourselves. This reading is from Annie Dillard's book, Pilgrim at Tinker Creek. It is still the first week in January, and I've got great plans. I've been thinking about seeing. There are lots of things to see, unwrapped gifts and free surprises. The world is fairly studded and strewn with pennies cast broadside from a generous hand. But, and this is the point, who gets excited by a mere penny? If you follow one arrow, if you crouch motionless on a bank to watch a tremulous ripple thrill on the water and are rewarded by the sight of a muskrat kit paddling from its den, will you count that sight a chip of copper only and go your rueful way? It is dire poverty indeed when a man is so malnourished and fatigued that he won't stoop to pick up a penny. But if you cultivate a healthy poverty and simplicity so that finding a penny will literally make your day, then since the world is in fact planted in pennies, you have with your poverty bought a lifetime of days. It is that simple. What you see is what you get. There is another kind of seeing that involves a letting go. When I see this way, I sway, transfixed and emptied. The difference between the two ways of seeing is the difference between walking with and without a camera. When I walk with a camera, I walk from shot to shot, reading the light on a calibrated meter. When I walk without a camera, my own shutter opens and the moment's light prints on my own silver gut.
American Buddhist Joseph Goldstein tells that story about his friend's son raising his hand in class one day, answering the question about what color is an apple, answering it with white. He tells that story and then he says this: perception without mindfulness keeps us on the surface of things, and we often miss other levels of reality. It is that simple. What you see is what you get, writes Annie Dillard in her classic book, Pilgrim at Tinker Creek. She could have easily have written, how you see is what you get, or you are the one assigning meaning to this chip of copper, this muskrat kit paddling from its den, this apple. Dillard's way of seeing and assigning meaning emerges from a year spent in a cabin by herself, observing Tinker Creek and the mountains that surround it. We can learn from Dillard's year in the woods, just as we learn from reading earlier transcendentalists like Thoreau, Emerson, and Fuller. We can learn what it is to let go and to truly see. As we let go, we empty ourselves of the meanings we give to the pennies and boulders, the treasures and obstacles of our lives. As we let go, the only moment is now, and things appear as they really are. The difference between the two ways of seeing is the difference between walking with and without a camera. Now, who here hasn't spent almost their entire vacation behind the lens of a camera? I remember when my oldest daughter graduated from high school, I arrived at the auditorium loaded down with cameras, because it was before the time when I had one camera that could do both still and motion. So I had my video camera and my digital still camera. I was ready for her graduation. And then one friend showed up who just happened to be a professional videographer who just happened to have his camera. And then another friend showed up and she had her pretty nice, expensive digital camera from work. They both looked at me and said, "Put your cameras away." They gave me the gift of being completely present, completely mindful to the experience of my oldest child graduating from high school. Before their gifts, I was ready to record that experience, not to actually experience it. Walking with a camera is to view all of life through a lens of interpretation. I see this way because my parents taught me to see this way. I am no good at this or that because my teacher told me. Walking without a camera is to drop the lens of blame and guilt. When we see our lives just as they are, the windows of our beings open wide, the moment's light imprints on us a new image. We become the observers of our own dramas. Without a year spent alone in the woods, without the aid of stalking muskrats or observing nature's cruel beauty, even we can see in this second way. This is the miracle of mindfulness that Thich Nhat Hanh writes about. When Dillard stalks muskrats, all she is aware of is stalking muskrats. When we wash dishes, we can practice being aware of just washing dishes. Now, the first time I read Thich Nhat Hanh's book, The Miracle of Mindfulness, I purposefully placed myself outdoors in my backyard. It was a beautiful day. I was mindful of the heat against my skin. I was mindful of my cat jumping in the grass. I was mindful of the squirrel yelling at my cat. I was mindful of every word on the page. Wow, I'm really good at this, I thought. Which is the trick, of course. As soon as we think we've got it, we really don't. The miracle of mindfulness is much more than being completely present to washing the dishes or a daughter's graduation. Being conscious of each breath, each movement, every thought and feeling, everything which has any relation to ourselves seems sort of selfish. But how can we be aware of anything if we aren't even aware of our own self? Joseph Goldstein says mindfulness is the key to being fully awake. Books like his Insight Meditation, Lama Surya Das's Awakening the Buddha Within, and Thich Nhat Hanh's many books are instruction manuals in the art of mindfulness. It is a great concept, one that many of us who are not Buddhists are attracted to. It has crept its way into Western self-help thought and become a recipe for stress reduction. To lift the concept off the page, we actually have to practice it. Personally, I like to practice mindfulness in the shower. This seems so simple at first. Half asleep, my mind might actually be slow enough to just let me take a shower. Each morning I start my day standing in the shower, determined to just take a shower, and then I usually end up planning my day, writing my sermon, figuring out the grocery list, designing brilliant arguments that perhaps I might need later in the day. Well, the list goes on. My mind is involved in every sort of activity except taking a shower. I try again. After getting dressed and drying my hair, after which I realized I've done everything except pay attention to getting dressed and drying my hair, I try again. Thich Nhat Hanh writes, every day and every hour one should practice mindfulness. That's easy to say, he says, but to carry it out in practice is not. No kidding. So then he suggests we set aside one day a week to practice. A whole day? I must be a bad Buddhist. And so we begin again. Waking up in the morning, we smile and breathe. We notice during the day when our shoulders are up around our ears. We stop, we breathe. We can become more aware by measuring our breath with our footsteps, counting as we breathe or following our breath while carrying on a conversation. We practice mindfulness during mundane activities such as making tea, washing the dishes, cleaning house, taking a shower. Because when the really big moments in life arrive, we want to be able to throw down our camera and see beneath the surface of things. Annie Dillard's year at Tinker Creek begins with a transcendent experience when the late afternoon sun plays tricks with silvery fish, the creek, and floating flower petals. Something broke and something opened, she writes. I filled up like a new wineskin. I breathed in air like light. I saw a light like water. I was the lip of a fountain, the creek filled forever. I was ether, the leaf in the zephyr. I was flesh flake, feather, bone. When I see this way, I see truly. As Thoreau says, I return to my senses. Dillard's mindfulness practice in nature takes her to a transcendent place, a place where she becomes more than just herself. It is not always this way, she confesses. She must adopt a healthy poverty, a simplicity, so that a mere penny can make her day. Hers is the classic solitary experience of the transcendentalist from our Unitarian tradition. Thoreau spent 2 years alone in the woods observing the natural world and drawing conclusions about the nature of reality. In her autobiography, Unitarian Margaret Fuller recounted her moment of awakening during a walk on Thanksgiving Day in 1831. Only 21, filled with despair for herself and all of humankind, she walked through fields as fast as she could, as if running from her deep sadness. She walked for hours, emptying herself. In her description of that day, she recalls the bleak clouds, the cold November wind, and the shrunken stream. Suddenly, the sun breaks into her gray day, and with it, a thought that burns as brightly as the sun. With that thought, she saw the ineffable, the unutterable. She perceived mindfully. Here is where I confess that not only am I a bad Buddhist, but I may also be a bad transcendentalist. It is difficult for me to be one with the heat, one with the cat and the squirrel. This may be because I am a suburban dweller whose experiences with nature mostly come in the form of squirrels, cats, lizards, store-bought plants. I do not have muskrats paddling around in my backyard. I do have occasional visits in nature, glimpses of awe-inspiring vistas. And of course, now that I live in California, I have more than the occasional chance to breathe in air like light. One visit in nature stays with me, imprinted on my being by the light of insight and new awareness. Several summers ago, I shared a rented cottage on a creek with some family members. One morning we observed a nutria, or a beaver, or a rat. I'm not really sure what it was. Add bad naturalist to my labels. So we watched it bathing in the creek just below a stack of sticks that we presumed was some sort of dam. A mother duck and her 4 babies swam into the light and back to the shadows and back into the light. We saw a chipmunk. We recognized a chipmunk, something we never see in Texas. A weeping willow filled the yard just below the deck of the house where we were staying. I cannot identify all of the birds by name or the water plants that lined the shore of the creek. And disappointingly, I was not the lip of a fountain, the creek filled forever. Rather, I noticed how the weeping willow reminded me of the trees from my childhood. I was mindful of my sister reading a book in the morning sun, how thin she had become. I was present to my youngest daughter, recently turned 18, as she joined the adults on the deck each morning for a cup of coffee. I was mindful of why we were there. My mother had died the September before our summer gathering. We rented a cottage on the creek in a small town in upstate New York because we were in that small town to bury her ashes. We gathered in a tiny cemetery that contains the remains of my ancestors going back to the 18th century. My father is buried there. My grandparents, my great-grandparents, my great-grandfather's parents, their parents. My mother had been planning this trip for us for years. "When you take my ashes to Socrates," she used to say to us. She left detailed instructions, including an article cut from the Houston newspaper about a historic house in the area. She had written on the edges of this article, "You might want to visit when you take my ashes to Socrates." I knew what to expect from this trip. I knew where we were headed. I knew what we would see. I had imagined it many mornings in the shower when I was failing at my mindfulness practice. After the service at the cemetery, standing on the deck of the cottage by the creek with cousins, mother's college friends, and my family, I did not stand transfixed and emptied as Annie Dillard does at the sight of silvery fish, a creek, and floating flower petals. I stood transfixed and emptied at the sight of the shining people, memories retold, the laughter, and a weeping willow that bent down over us, mirroring our sadness. I was not the lip of a fountain, the creek filled forever. I was not one with the birds or the plants that I could not even name. I was filled with the unexpected letting go of what this trip was supposed to be like. One with a newfound connection with my family and our shared history. Right mindfulness is the seventh step on the Noble Eightfold Path. It is the kind of seeing that involves a letting go. It is Thoreau's returning to our senses. It is seeing beyond the surface into other levels of reality. It is knowing that the color of an apple is white. In the original Mindfulness Sutra, the Buddha described the four foundations of mindfulness. We are to be aware of our bodies, aware of our feelings and emotions, aware of our thoughts, and aware of events. We practice mindfulness during mundane activities such as making tea, washing the dishes, cleaning the house, taking a shower. Because when the really big moments in life arrive, we want to be able to throw down our cameras and experience and see beyond the surface of things. We practice mindfulness during mundane activities because in reality there is no difference between the mundane and the extraordinary. We practice mindfulness during mundane activities to remind us that every moment is sacred. miracle of mindfulness is that we see past the masks, the limiting thoughts, and the labels. The miracle of mindfulness is sitting with a dying loved one and seeing them as if for the first time. It is listening to our partner during an argument and not replaying all the past arguments. It is seeing our child not as a reflection of ourselves, but as a separate person continually unfolding in front of our eyes. What we see is what we get. And when we see deeply, when we perceive with mindfulness, what we get will transform us. May it be so, and amen. Taking just a moment to go into a little bit of a meditation, not back to where we were at the beginning of the service when we meditated. That would be going out of the present moment. Staying in this present moment, staying now with the thoughts that are running in your mind. Just take a brief moment to close your eyes or slightly close your eyes. Just to notice where you are now. In this moment now. Notice your breathing now. Notice how you feel now. Notice your back against the chair now, your feet on the floor now. It is this coming back to the present moment, this practice that trains us to truly see, to be awake, to look beneath the surface of things. Please join hands. What we see is what we get. And when we see deeply, when we perceive with mindfulness, what we get will transform us. Go in peace, blessed be, and amen.
We are the Conejo Valley Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. Our mission is to nurture spiritually courageous people who transform the world through justice and compassion. Like us on Facebook, check out our website at CVUUF.org, or come visit us. See you soon!